Joya, it's so great to have you on this show.
Sonali, how are you? Nice to meet you.
I am all ready to hear about your career transitions.
Well, I have made my living as a television anchor for 20 years. Very specifically, I covered the financial markets from the floor of the stock exchange. And that profession really fit me for two reasons. One of which is that I grew up in a home where it was very apparent to me that women didn't have a voice. I grew up in a traditional Indian home and a traditional Indian household. The second reason why that profession made sense for me, especially when it comes to business news, is that I loved explaining every day the math and the science that went into making your money relevant to you. I'm a very no-nonsense person, and it fit my personality. And I couldn't wake up every day, even though it was 2:30 in the morning, to get up and do the news. And so the career transition truly happened because on the side of those 20 years, for 7 of them, I ran a leadership platform called LadyDrinks. And it truly was just started as a business development exercise because I had launched a production company on the side. And in an effort to make sure that the production pipeline always had projects, I started having these meetups. And then it became a bigger brand than anything I had ever done on television. And there came a point where I had to stop doing 2 things kind of half-assed and do one thing well. And I was spending all of my free time working on Lady Drink, so it was just time. And I made sure that I built an ecosystem of support before I jumped off the proverbial ledge. And that means I hired a coach, a branding coach, a communications coach, a business coach, basically a coterie, an entire advisory board that was going to be accountable to me anytime I had a question, because when you jump off and make that transition, it's scary. So you need to have that advisory board in place before you jump off the ledge, not pull the parachute after.
I have 2 questions for you. You talk about doing a side hustle. It's a concept that I've read about, heard from specifically Dory Clark, who writes about it and talked about it on her show here. How difficult is it to maintain a side hustle? And for how long does one do it before one realizes that that really is the thing that one should pivot to?
As I said, I ran mine for 7 years, and it was increasingly physically hard for me to get up at 2:30 in the morning, be into work by 3:30, be on the air at 5, and then host an event at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. Like, one end of my day had to give simply because I couldn't be present for both. It just wasn't going to work. Physically, it wasn't going to work. And I wanted so badly to be more present for the day part that was at the end of my day, because I was really passionate about the human relationships that I was making, which I don't necessarily have when you're just sitting and talking to a camera. Unless you're actually interviewing somebody, which is a CEO, which is for all of 3 minutes of my entire day, most of it is spent talking to a camera. But the actual interaction with a human being was so much more rewarding. So for me, I think I had to come to a place where I was financially set up where I could jump off that ledge. And so as part of those systems and processes that I put in place is that I started membership. Like, I formally launched membership to have a little bit of financial runway so that I could jump off and actually start to do this. Because you still got to eat, like, you can't just kind of jump off the ledge and hope for the best. So for me, building that financial runway was really when it was okay for me to decide that my side hustle was going to become my main hustle. But the other piece that kind of nested behind that is that all of my free time was being directed towards this one thing. It had become the bigger brand. And so I needed to give it its due. Like, nothing else that I was applying for at that time in terms of work really felt authentic to me. It was just time.
What were some of the challenges that you experienced as you were transitioning into what used to be the side hustle?
I had to formalize membership. I had to justify the pricing of membership. I had already trained my audience to pay by event, but now I'm introducing a new payment structure, and what am I offering in exchange for that? And for me to really have, it's not even so much about the mechanics of that, it's having the conviction that my time is worth something, and then attaching a price tag to it. I think that worthiness journey has been the biggest trajectory for me. And now I'm charging infinitely more than I did in those first couple days. And it's only because my worthiness has caught up to that.
I find that concept interesting because I know a lot of women, myself including, who don't really a know that their time has a particular value. And once you've made the determination that it does, what is that value? What tips would you have?
Number one, you've got to build a network, and that's not your social network. That's not even your family network. That's got to be a coterie of 5 people that are on the same level as you. Every day, no joke, I am thinking about the 5 people I surround myself with. And those people have to be a little bit further ahead than me. They have to be having different conversations. They have to be living a different life. They're engaging with different people. They can't be people that are takers. They have to be people that are givers. And it has to be a two-way relationship. So for me, I really think that point number one is to look around and see who you're surrounding yourself with. Because if the people you're surrounding yourself with don't believe they deserve to be paid, where in the world are you going to learn that? I actively changed the petri dish in which I hung out. And I'm now surrounded by people that are like, yeah, and you should be getting paid 16 times more than that. Like I do. Why shouldn't you? And so I think that's a huge thing. But you've got to be able to learn that from somewhere. And I have created a platform where people can come to learn that. I'm automatically plugging and playing you into a platform where women already think that way. So if you don't know how to create it for yourself, I've created it for you.
You're saying that it's your ecosystem of coaches that'll help you get to determining the value of your time. And then if we don't know how to do it, then you have a platform that allows us to get plugged in and learn from that ecosystem that you've already created for us.
A little bit. I don't think that's 100% accurate. I think that you can have coaches and hire coaches that can tell you that you need to charge more. But the real change, the real incremental change and lasting change is going to come from who are you surrounding yourself with? Who is in your social circle that you spend time with talking about your business, how to grow your business, how to scale your business? And I'm really mindful of those 5 people that are in my immediate circle because yes, I could be talking about Fendi purses, but that's not where I want to focus my energy.
In reflecting back on your transition journey, are there any transition myths that you'd like to debunk?
I think it's on the time and that my time is worth something. I see so many people giving things away for free or very little money because they don't believe that they are worth more. And I think that business of not being worth more comes up again and again and again. Your time absolutely means something, but in order for you to be able to figure out what that benchmark is, I think, again, you have to go to a consortium of people that are doing what you're doing to ask them what the benchmark is. What does the market command right now for what service you are providing? And if you don't have that sort of sounding board, then you're never going to know how to price yourself. You're just creating things in a silo. So I think it's important to be able to go to market with what the market is demanding.
So it's almost a go to market strategy for whatever services that you as an individual are looking to offer to the market.
And I
Okay.
think we as women, as a collective, also need to start being more transparent and be in circles where we're talking about what we are commanding in terms of price. Because guess what? Men do it all the time. They've been doing it since time immemorial. It's called Friday night at a bar. They're sitting around, they're talking about what they're charging and what they made. But we as women, we have to have compassion for ourselves. We've really only been in the workforce for 30 plus years. So we're just coming into places where we have agency, but part of that agency comes from being able to talk to each other and say, what did you charge for that? I don't know what to charge. Okay, well, this is what I charge and this is what this person charged. So I think that, starting out, you should come in at this level, but do not come in at this level. That's just doing yourself a disservice.
I don't know the last time I ever sat and talked or exchanged information about pricing for services within a group of women.
Well, who are you surrounding yourself with? That's the next question to ask.
Right. Moving on to LadyDrinks. So, if I recall, you mentioned you started that as a side hustle while you were reporting, and I think it fulfilled the relationship, the human part of your psyche. How did that evolve as you jumped full time into the business?
People often ask me, don't you miss journalism? Like, I don't miss journalism. I just happen to do journalism now on my own terms. So, in other words, if I book Misty Copeland to speak at my women's initiative, I'm going to interview Misty Copeland. If I book the CEO of Vimeo, I interviewed the CEO of Vimeo. But when you're when you're a cog in a much bigger wheel, well, let's say when I was at CNN, just because I booked somebody doesn't mean that I'm the one that necessarily gets to interview them. And so for me, having, again, agency, having that, I created this and now I get to have the benefit on the back end is what is really alluring to me in now running this business. Have I left journalism? No. Everything that I did in journalism, I now use to run my business, but I get like the ultimate sort of satisfaction in being able to be a true journalist rather than leaving my welfare in somebody else's hand that's sitting in a boardroom somewhere.
My next question is about challenges that you've experienced as an entrepreneur. And I think you already mentioned a few, which is, new sort of payment ideas, your go-to-market strategy. And then overall, looking back, what would you do differently as an entrepreneur, if anything?
Oh gosh, I would have charged more. I would have built a team earlier. But all those things have to come in their own due time. You have to be ready for it. I now realize in my 9th year that it is so important to protect only the things that I can do. I have to be up here and be the strategic thinker. In order for that to happen, I've got to have space in my schedule, just space and time to think and innovate. So that means that I can't be the CEO and be the janitor, and there have been times where I'm cleaning up after an event too. That is not the best use of my talent. So you got to build that team as soon as you're able, and you need to start to outsource, delegate, and automate so many of those tasks that don't fall within your purview of talent. Because you're the one that's going to set the vision, and you have to really hire other people that are going to execute on that.
And is it more challenging or less challenging to get to that goal when you start off as a solopreneur?
I am a solopreneur. I think it's challenging just from a financial standpoint. You have to have that financial runway to be able to hire people, but it's a little bit of chicken and egg. You're not going to be able to scale if you don't have that team put in place. So I think you have to build the tracks before the train comes, knowing that your vision is that you're going to be building and scaling very, very quickly. So you've got to build the infrastructure to be able to do the intake long before the deluge comes.
In your experience working with female executives, are there any themes or patterns that you've observed in women executives and public speaking?
Number one, time management. We're all at home. Everybody's got kids. Everybody's got aging parents. Everybody's got spouses and dogs and, homeschooling. So right now, in this particular micro moment of time, it's just that women are feeling the brunt of everything, whether you're an executive or not. So time management, pandemic or no, is always a challenge. And then let's do some subsets beneath that. Time management, like in terms of self-care. How do I work 18 hours a day and still make self-care come first? The other piece is, how do I show up in all the other spaces in my life, mother, sister, wife, and show up fully in all of those places when I'm just drained and I'm not able to give to me? Or how is it that I even line myself up for that promotion, given that I'm now in this modality? How do I even speak up and ask for that? There's no water cooler moments anymore. So I think that's number one. Number two is productivity. I can't tell you how many times I give the productivity lecture, which is, what is it that you want? What are your top 2 priorities? And once you know what those top 2 priorities are, everything else is a no until you move the needle on number 1 and 2. So the productivity conversation comes up again and again, but I think it's also about self-awareness. You have to know when you are the most productive. There's actually an app for that. It's called Peak Time. You can tap it 10 times and it spits out when your body is at its prime for creativity or productivity. Mine, unfortunately, is between 9 and 11 at night when I'm definitely asleep. But at least that's information. If I ever decide to finally write that book, maybe that's the hours that it's going to actually happen for me. So I think knowing your peak time is a key piece to your productivity. I think the third thing right now is I'm managing a team and how do I get people to get shit done? I've given the directive, why isn't it getting done? And it's because people are burned out. People are not feeling connected. They're feeling disconnected. And so that culture building piece is a huge one. Like, how do I get people to show up again and be engaged? And that's really just a product of like the last few months when we just thought we were out of this, but we're not for a little while and people are just burned out. So again and again, those are the three themes that come up.
I'm hearing time management, and then you expanded that into 3 subsets. There was productivity management, and then there's building culture and engagement within the team.
Yeah. And then the final piece that I'll add, and that's why I now have a public speaking masterclass, is being able to speak cogently, clearly, and have impact, because again, you are relegated to just this screen right now. And so how do you have impact? How do you get team buy-in? So more and more people have been asking me for public speaking coaching, and the realization on the back end is always about courage and confidence. Yes, ostensibly it's about the elocution, but so much of it is an inside job. And that's what they realize after 6 sessions of working with me.
One question on courage and confidence. I think it was Debbie Millman's podcast. I can't remember her guest, but they talk about courage and confidence. And the conversation was, is it courage before confidence, or is it vice versa, or does it even matter? I'd love to get your opinion on that.
I'll explain that by way of example. So in my class, I had 4 corporate women. And I asked each of them at the very outset of the class, who do you admire? Or what position do you want to have? And I would say 9 out of 10, well, there was only 4 people in the class, but everybody picked Indra Nooyi. One person picked Steve Jobs. And I said, okay, so what are the traits of Indra Nooyi that you admire? High emotional intelligence, decisive, eloquent. They picked 6. I'm like, okay, so now I want you to go back and look at your whole career, not the job that you're in now. Look at your whole career. And I want you to tell me a story about a time that you were eloquent, that you were decisive, that you demonstrated compliance, that you demonstrated high emotional intelligence. And what happened by the end of 6 classes, because they've done this now 6 times, they don't look at Indra Nooyi and see them as somebody who's up on a pedestal. They're like, I have those traits too. It doesn't seem like such a pie in the sky, but they needed to have the courage to show up and tell these stories to now walk away with that confidence that they too have value. So to me, I think that the promise that was made at the outset is that you're going to have more confidence, but it took the courage muscle for them to really get there.
I love that story. I saw on LinkedIn, you wrote that resonated beautifully with me, and it was just 2 bullets. I think it said, what can I say that has not been said before? And who will listen to me? Mm-hmm. I think women in particular struggle with that all the time. What advice would you give us?
All right, well, let's take the first one. What am I going to say that somebody hasn't already said? You could be a vegan food blogger. In your case, you're a consultant, you're a business coach. There's a million business coaches. There are no new stories. There's just new ways to tell the same stories. And the only way that you're going to stand out and be unique, and again, we're flexing that courage muscle, you've got to be able to tell your own personal stories. So if, for example, the other day I was talking about zeitgeist and someone's like, I don't know what zeitgeist is. I said, zeitgeist is when you and I have a conversation about Me Too. Zeitgeist is when you and I have a conversation about Black Lives Matter. It's the current conversation of the day. But you don't know that until I explain that to you, right? So again, if I'm sharing a concept that you have no idea what I'm talking about, the only way that you can do that from your own perspective, from where you sit in the world, is through your own personal story. And so that is how you can talk about something that's already being talked about in the ether, but you make it unique and you make it personal and you make it from your lens and from where you sit. Who's going to listen to what you have to say? I mean, I think the way you have impact is by telling a really compelling story. So it's not enough to just get up there and slap a bunch of data up there and then walk away and be like, all right, my work here is done. You've got to be able to have stories to explain, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's where I am the one to solve it. And by the way, let me tell you about a transformation that I was able to achieve because of my solution. So I think that again, that is when you're going to have buy-in. If you can master the art of being able to tell stories in an impactful, emotional way. First of all, if you're telling a personal story, it's going to be easier for you to tell because you experienced it firsthand. Second of all, it's going to be so much easier for your audience to remember you. But if you sit in the esoteric and you stay in the data and you stay inaccessible, then you become forgettable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've read and heard many times that the data people forget, it's only the stories that people remember.
And don't get me wrong, the data has its place. It's
Sure.
important. But you can't come with the entire basket of data. You have to come with maybe the top 3 things that someone needs to know about the point that you're about to make.
Speaking of stories, and since you're such a master storyteller yourself, would you mind sharing a story or two, just anything memorable in terms of your coaching experience?
Wow. Yes. So I had a student who came from a little teeny tiny village in the south of India. And she was so smart. You could tell it was all up here. But where she was really getting tripped up was in her public speaking. Everything was just getting jumbled up because she was just talking too fast. She kept putting in filler words. She was tripping over herself. And you didn't even have the patience to listen to her, even though she had valuable things to say. So she entered into my class, and my work with her specifically was on slowing way down, letting sentences land, and not being afraid of the pause. If you get off track and you lose your train of thought, you are completely within your power to pause, gather your thoughts, and start again. In fact, it's actually going to be arresting for the audience because they can't understand why no one's speaking. And she's a leader, by the way, at a major company. And so by the end of this class, she not only mastered the art of public speaking, but she gave a presentation to 200 people. And her boss, who had dinged her at the very beginning for not having great public speaking skills, gave her great feedback, and other people gave her feedback. And I'm so proud of her because she came from this like nothing village in India. And today she is at a Fortune 500 company in a leadership position because of her own moxie. And she only needed to fix like this one thing that was standing in the way of anybody seeing her as that powerful leader.
What an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it. Is there anything, Joya, that I should have asked you and I didn't?
I think that it's easy to see all of this and be like, wow, look at all that. But I think it's important to understand that I came from a home of domestic violence. I used to witness my father beat my mother more often than I care to admit. I have a brother who has been incarcerated in federal prison 5 times. So I am a testament today of somebody who's had vision since I was a really young age. I've been super persistent because of that vision. And I've gotten here because I was really great at building my own support systems along the way in the absence of family, a functional family. And so I don't think you would really understand why I'm so deeply committed to this women's work today and building support systems for other women unless you understood where I have come from.
That is such a fantastic thing to share. And I think it takes a lot of courage to share that in public. Joya, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I was happy to be here.